Welcome to the SYNDIC8 Series. I'm Chris John, and I've got a very special guest today, Jason Greenwood of Greenwood Consulting, and also the host of E-commerce Edge Podcast, the E-commerce Edge Podcast. Welcome. Glad you're here.
Thank you so much, mate. It's super cool to be here with you today. Thank you for hosting.
I was hoping we might be able to take a minute, have you kind of introduce yourself and what you do, and welcome to the show. Appreciate it.
Thank you so much. No, it's really great to be here with you today. Look, I'm really fortunate. I love this industry. I've been working in the e-commerce space for nearly 25 years. This is currently my 24th year in the industry. 2025 will be my 25th year in the industry. And if you look back in those early days of the e-commerce world, man, everything was just difficult. There was no Shopify back then. There was no easy to use platforms. There was no easy to use SaaS platforms. Everything was custom built. Everything was difficult. Everything was expensive. The world didn't trust e-commerce at that time. And so if I look back at that, it's gotten so much easier in many respects, but it's gotten a lot more competitive too. And anybody and their dog can start up an e-commerce website today. Doesn't mean they're going to be successful, but the barrier to entry to getting into e-commerce has dropped radically over the last 24, 25 years. I've been fortunate to not only have my own e-commerce pure play, but I've also worked brand side. I've run and built agencies over the years, and for the last 4+ years, I've had my own e-commerce consultancy, and we've really started to specialize and drill down into, since I started my consultancy, into the B2B e-commerce space specifically. And one of the reasons I decided to specialize in B2B e-commerce was it's so blue ocean, right? There's not that many B2B e-commerce experts out there. There's tons of B2C and D2C experts out there, and it's a very red ocean, and every agency and their dog, every consultant and their dog specializes in B2C and D2C, but not a lot of B2B specialization out there. And I noticed that when I look back at my career and I look back at the most interesting, most complex, most deep projects I was ever involved in, they were always the B2B projects, and got deeply involved in the back office technology as well as the customer-facing tech. And so that's really why I've decided to specialize in B2B, and it's a super, super fun space to be in. And about 2 years ago, I added a few more strings to my bow. In addition to consulting with merchants and sellers in the B2B world, I now also consult to investors, platform vendors, as well as agencies working in the B2B e-commerce space. And so it's been a real fun expansion of my services, and it really challenges me and pushes me every single day.
Well, I think you're spot in the area that we operate in. Our customer base is typically the brand or an intermediary, and we're typically delivering data to marketplaces, to direct-to-consumer sites, to retailers, and it never ends. As a matter of fact, I kind of doing a retrospect on my last podcast, and we talked about, we do a lot in the footwear and fashion space, and just looking at the last 5 years or so, just the percentage of sales that are online now relative to where they were even 4 or 5 years ago, it's a dramatic input. I mean, it's just, the numbers are pretty staggering. So most of our customers, when they put a solution in like ours, are typically doubling or tripling their network very, very quickly. And in the B2B world, which I think is underserved, and I think it's coming up pretty quickly, one of the things that you point out in your last podcast, which I thought was spot on, was a lot of these firms are, sometimes they're family owned, sometimes they're generationally owned. So business is business, and it never changes. I think the ones that are more progressive are looking at this channel as something that is just a massive opportunity for their brand or for their company, their manufacturer. And you look at where that could go, and you say, look, you've got potentially an endless list of B2B clients here that are looking for easy ways to buy product from you in bulk. As when the kind of the subtle difference here, but when you put a purchase order up for a wholesale order, you're usually buying $10,000, $15,000, $20,000 worth of products. So you've got to get that all built into a PO, and it's going to flow. You've got to check all the inventory. It's the details of how that works. And if you do it right, it's going to be simple. It's got to be, hey, I've got to be able to browse, filter, get to the products that I want very, very rapidly, put them into a cart, and package them and sell them. And I'd love to hear your thoughts and experiences around, the B2B order management space, and what works and what doesn't work from your perspective.
You raise a very good point. A lot of these businesses, they've been built on the back of field sales teams, sales reps, building relationships, going and knocking on doors, going to, industry-based conferences, and, having a booth there as a supplier in their specific vertical. And if we go back even before that, being in the yellow pages and have a very significant physical presence in the market. And we now know that over 60% of B2B buyers in the United States today are now millennials. And so the reality is that the buying demographic in the B2B world is changing, but the seller demographic is not changing as quickly. And as a result of that, a lot of these B2B sellers, they are behind the times. They don't realize that their buying demographic has changed. They don't realize that these buyers are buying as part of their day job. They're not browsing to be inspired. They're browsing to do their job. And so the reality is they want to do it quickly. They want to do it easily. They want to do it seamlessly. And ultimately, they want to get on to more valuable parts of their day rather than managing, spending a significant amount of time with procurement. One of the things we see in the B2B world that's a little bit unique is the fact that there's 3 primary digital sales channels that exist in the B2B world, whereas in the B2C, D2C world, there's only one. There's e-commerce, right? There's a website where you go to and you shop. Sure, there's marketplaces and all the rest, but for a brand that's selling direct to consumer, they're selling usually through their marketplace and maybe through some physical stores. In the B2B world, the buyers will dictate, or they should dictate anyway, how they want to buy through. And in the B2B world, oftentimes there's EDI, electronic data interchange, which means the buyer's ERP is talking to the seller's ERP and placing orders automatically with virtually zero human intervention. We have punch out, which is similar to EDI in that we're taking our catalog, we're digitalizing it, we're integrating it into the buyer's e-procurement software to make it easy for them to procure as part of a standardized procurement process that is electronic. And then that order gets sent back via the punch out system electronically to the seller's system for fulfillment. And then we have self-service e-commerce, which is the closest thing to what we have in the B2C and D2C world, which is, okay, I'm a B2B buyer. I log in. I see my price list. I see the SKUs I have access to. I see my MOQs. I see my buying increments. I see all those things. I add a bunch of stuff to my cart. I click checkout, and usually that's shipped to me immediately. And then the bill for that is put on a trade account with me to pay 30 days, 60, 90 days later. Just by virtue of 3 major digital selling channels in the B2B world, just that fact alone makes it significantly more complex than the equivalent D2C or B2C experience.
Yeah,
then, and I'll hand it back over to you in a second. The final complexity that we really have to think about very deeply in the B2B world that is very unique versus the B2C and D2C world is that in the B2C and D2C world, for example, we only have one price per product, right? In the B2B world, price is an attribute of the customer, right? And there are many, many other data points like this that are very, very different when we start thinking about the subtle differences between trying to do digital commerce in a B2B environment versus a B2C environment. There are lots of differences there. And if you've never played in this environment before, if you've never lived in this environment, if you've never consulted to these B2B brands, if you've never been inside their businesses and understand how they operate and the language they use with each other and with their customers, if you've never done that and you've only ever worked in the B2C and D2C world, it's like a whole new, it's like you need to learn a whole new dictionary even to be able to have conversations with these people.
I look at the technologies that are out there and where I think things are going. And what we're starting to see emerge is exactly what you just said, that there's a sales executive that is responsible for a particular B2B relationship. And that output of that storefront is highly choreographed to what they want to buy or what they have bought in the past. Their pricing is specific, maybe even some of their presentation. They may arrange custom catalogs for them that are unique and built for them. And we're seeing that trend very, very clearly, even to the point of getting down to almost personalization for that relationship. So if they know there's a certain trigger or something that might interest the B2B buyer in doing, they kind of weave that in. So the data is becoming that ability, that flex with the data or the experience being almost tailored to the B2B customer is, I think, very unique. And I think it's important to the B2B space because they're buying in bulk. It represents a very significant purchase. And, I think a lot of the experience, sometimes if you go out to a direct-to-consumer site, it's consistent. Filter by the same thing. Buy one product, you might maybe like a couple in a cart. But when you're buying, across an inventory of 50, 60, or 100 products in a whack, and you're going to do it every quarter or every season, it's almost like you've got to make that as seamless as you possibly can, but also understand exactly what that that buyer is looking for. And I think that's really where the sales executive really can step in, because they've got that relationship. They should know what they like and want, and they can really hyper tailor the catalog to that relationship. And I'm just curious if you're seeing that kind of drive in the marketplace consistently the way we're seeing it.
Yeah, I mean, personalization in the B2B world means something very different, as you rightly point out. Personalization in the B2B world, we know who we're selling to. Oftentimes, we don't know, in the B2C, D2C world, we don't have a long-term relationship with that buyer, right? Sometimes they're buying actually as a guest, and the only time we actually even know their name is once they've actually checked out. We know which address we have to ship an item to. So we don't necessarily know their wants, their needs, their desires, all the things they're interested in. And so oftentimes search merchant personalization in the B2C and D2C world takes the form of wisdom of the crowd data, right? Which says, okay, on average, if somebody buys this, then they're likely to want to also buy this thing. Or if in 5 previous purchases, this woman has bought items, fashion items that are red, well, it's a pretty good indicator that she likes the color red, right? And so we can personalize based on their behavior and wisdom of the crowd. In the B2B world, it's very different. In the B2B world, to even set up a trade account with a B2B supplier, it's usually an entire application process. We know who they are. We do credit checks on them, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. We're tailoring the experience for them. We're establishing trade pricing for them. We're establishing a trade catalog dedicated to them. We're giving them credit limit with us. We're doing all these things. And so we tend to know our buyers very intimately in the B2B world. And so you're right, we're tailoring everything from the point where they log in, and even before they log in, we're starting to tailor these things for them. And then we're also starting to tailor things like which warehouse do they have access to that's closest to them, for example. Or okay, cool, we're gonna allow you to place an order, enter in your carrier's account number, and we're going to ship this shipment out on your carrier account instead of us paying for it and then billing you for the shipping. That's going to get billed directly to your own LTL account, for example. And so there's many, many other things like this where we have to know so much more about our customer to be able to service them at the level they expect us to service them at. And, it used to be maybe a nice to have digital routes to market. But what we saw during COVID was that these massive sales teams that were out there generating 75, 85, 95% of business, they couldn't go see clients anymore. So all these B2B brands, all of a sudden they went, holy crap, we have no way for these customers to interact and do business with us if we don't have digital routes to market. This is a really vulnerable place for us to be. The other thing that we see when we go in and we consult to these B2B brands is that for the brands that track their sales reps' time by activity, now not all do, but some of them do, and they'll say, okay, you spent this much time on this activity, this much time on this activity, this much time on this activity. We find that anywhere from 20 to 60% of a sales rep's time is spent on non-value add administrative duties. And if we can offload, and I don't know any salesperson alive that likes doing admin. I don't know a single salesperson alive that likes to come back to the office after they've been meeting with a client and manually type their customer's order into an ERP system. No sales rep likes that. But that's what they do. And in many cases, they have to email across price list as a spreadsheet to their customers. They have to email across product images. They have to email across spec sheets. They have to, it's almost like we're stuck in the dark ages in the B2B world, because it was the whole entire B2B experience was born out of the concept of a personal relationship. But we can now, with digital augmentation, I'm a massive advocate for salespeople. A lot of times when I first get brought in to speak to salespeople about digital opportunities, they look at me as the devil because I'm there to replace them with the machines, right? But give me 15 to 20 minutes with any sales team out there, and I'll walk out of that office being their best friend, because I am here. I'm here to make their lives better and easier, and to make them more productive so that they can do all the wonderful things they do. They can go out and hunt new business. They can knock on more doors. They can schmooze. They can look after their customers better. And usually salespeople love me for that.
Yeah, something that's a very good point, Justin. If you think about a typical sales guy, right? They care about their quota, exceeding their quota. They get paid. They get paid when they sell. And if they can extend that network, or they can get their existing buyers to buy more because you're making it easier. It's just easier to do business with these guys as opposed to this particular group because I got to go do 35 minutes of paperwork to get an order in. I honestly believe that has an incredible productivity value to the sales execs. Because, again, if you keep it simple, I started that theme, keep it simple, make it very, very personalized, and I even kind of going even threading that a bit more. Look, you can look at what they ordered last month and just create a new one off of that. You don't have to re-enter it all, and you can just easily just grow from there. And I think that's a great example of, not having to do the paperwork again. Hey, look, you did a order with us last season. Anything you'd like to modify on it this season, let's start with that as opposed to starting at zero every time. Or even I could enter it for you if you don't have the time. So that ability of getting the deal done as quickly and efficiently as you can, I think is massively important. If I was, a sales executive that had a quarter on his or her head and I needed I want to come in and blow that number out, I see this as probably the easiest way to do it. And I find my experience working with customers is that really half to three quarters of them, and I think that age kind of thing that you throw in there is spot on. If the people are comfortable with the technology and they're native to it, it's a lot easier for them to figure out how to really kind of use it and optimize it. Well, sometimes the older, this is all, I got to learn how to log into another system. I lost my password. You know what I'm talking about. It becomes a lot. I think as time changes, the skill sets change. The way people use technology, they're just used to it. And I think B2B is a great environment. I think it's underserved. And I think brands that are focusing on, they're going to have their channels, right? You're going to have a retail channel, you're going to have a direct-to-consumer channel, marketplace channel, and a wholesale channel. And that B2B wholesale channel, I think tech can really make a huge improvement in their overall sales and relationships with their customers. And, we're involved in some stuff now that, they're inviting the customer into the design of that. Hey, what do you want this to look like? What would help you? What kind of output? I want to basically be able to show them, dump my sheets because I've got to go report that internally to, my boss. And this is what I purchased from, Acme Corp today because it was the same order we had last time and they were running a special. I jumped it. Or they were running out of inventory and I wanted to get ahead of it. There's really a lot of compelling opportunity there to get a customer to hit that buy button. And I think on the B2B side, because you're looking at more information, it's highly tailored to them. That opportunity is significant and can make a big difference in the overall numbers.
Well, and there's 2 points I'd like to follow up on that basically validate exactly what you just said. There is an increasing number of wholesale distributors that will not do business with a manufacturing supplier unless they will integrate with their e-procurement system. Now, the reason for that is because in the wholesale distribution space, margins are razor thin. Like they are razor thin. And the reality is, if I have an opportunity to do business with 2 different manufacturers that manufacture a similar product, one I can deal with in an automated way, that cuts my cost to procure by 1%, 2%, 3%. That is significant. In the wholesale world, that is significant. And if I have to do everything manually through a sales rep on the other side, I know which supplier I'm going to be doing business with. I'm going to be doing business with the supplier that makes it fast and easy and puts margin back in my back pocket. That's the first thing. The second thing is the language, and it goes back to this language thing again. So I'm oftentimes brought in by a manufacturer or wholesaler distributor to lead interviews with their customers to have a discussion about what types of e-commerce functionality are important to them before we ever even go into scoping the solution. Because we want to ideally start our adoption planning even before we start thinking about the tech, the integration. We want to think about what will cause this solution to be adopted at a very high rate, both internally and externally. And when I lead these conversations, oftentimes maybe the first question might be, hey, look, if we offered you self-service e-commerce as a channel to buy through, would that interest you? And they go, no, not really. I like Bob or I like Jane, my account manager, and they treat me really well, and I have a great relationship with them. And I just send them an email with a CSV attached, and they process my order for me. So this is great. At the top of the spreadsheet, I put my PO number, and they key it into the system, and they give me great service, right? But then you start digging a little bit deeper, and you say, well, okay, that's fine if you could continue to place orders the way that you do today. But let's say you had a platform you could log into, you could check inventory, you could check your prices, you could check the status of your shipments once they leave our warehouse to where they get to your warehouse. You could download your statement history and your invoice history. You could make an electronic quote request, instead of having to craft this email and send it off to your account manager and wait for it to go through the machinations inside the business, you just place your electronic quote request directly against the products in the catalog. You could make your RMA request instead of having to send an email or a WhatsApp message to your account manager for a return authorization number. You could all do that electronically online. They start to think, that would be helpful. That would be massively helpful. Even if we make our purchases via EDI or punch out today, all these other digital services would make us a lot more efficient if we could do that digitally instead of having to send emails and freaking carrier pigeon messages to each other. And so it's sometimes just about digging a little bit deeper to figure out what is it today about the way we service you that's painful. What is it today that you don't like? You might like Jane and you might like Bob, but what about our service level is frustrating for you? And I tell you, when you ask the question, when you dig a little bit deeper, they will be pretty transparent about the things they don't like.
Yeah, and I think the other it kind of ties into that. Sometimes there's a limit to what their current systems and their current systems architecture can do. Not everybody's running the latest and greatest, and oftentimes they have to make it fit. And sometimes it's not elegant and it's not pretty, but to upgrade an ERP system or a CRM system, it's not trivial. It takes time to do it. And sometimes it's like, okay, we just need to get the order in. We need to get that order down the pipe because they'll find a way to make it work. And I think our experience is you shouldn't have to worry about the tech. You should just get the order down the pipe and get that, whether it's a piece of paper, whether you can get it to flow all the way through, terrific. But in the end, it's all about getting the Bible. And if you can get it, well, there you go. Now you get your commission coming at you. And I think that's exactly what the sales guys are starting to, they're kind of figuring it out. It's a great tool to get them because I can really choreograph almost what I want to show them. I can give them a best price. I can give them a special price for today because I'm over inventoried. Hey, if you buy this today, I can give you another 10% or another 4%. And as you said, the margins are very, very thin. But if you look at the opportunity to optimize your inventory, right? Not just brand, but there's reasons to give big discount if you're overstocked or if you're understocked, you got to replenish because they're about to put another big order in for next season. Having that data and that predictability, I think minimizes your risk and potentially maximizes your profitability. And I don't think that's going to change. I don't care what you're selling. You can be selling shoes, you can be selling tires, bikes. It really doesn't matter. But if you get that right, and if you learn from that data and you see the repetitive opportunity to capitalize against that data, I think then you're doing something very, very different. And I think, the big marketplaces obviously do this very well at what I'll call the direct-to-consumer level. But in the B2B space, I think it's emerging because not every one of these companies is, a Walmart. A lot of them might be a mom and pop shop in Texas that's selling, a particular product, a special boot or whatever it is, cowboy hat. And it's very unique. But hey, I could also sell that in Arizona. There's a huge market for that in Mexico. I just got to get the stuff translated to Spanish. What was a big technical challenge might not be so. And, I'm curious, and I'm going to switch a topic on you here, if I could. But when I look at AI and what the opportunities are with AI, again, I always bring it back, Jason, to the sales channel. Hey, what if I could, get this converted to Spanish on the fly, or I could optimize this, or I need to have it? Because a lot of customers that we work with, they think of North America. And North America is, the U.S. It is even, sometimes it's not even Canada. But if you look at the number of people that potentially could be, you could expand that to, again, you've got to have your distribution network in place and everything else. But there's a lot of buyers out there for products that are non-U.S. And you can take that to Europe and go anywhere you want. But the reality of it is, I think a lot of companies that we deal with are geographically limited, either by language or they can't get the orders in. And with the with the advances in AI, language translations are pretty seamless at this point. The ability to build content or holes in the content on the fly or highly tailored content, knowing who the buyer is. I think you've got very, very unique opportunities over the next 3 to 5 years. And I'd like to maybe stop talking now and flip that over to you. Where do you think it's going? What do you see?
It's super interesting. You make a very good point, which is that, a lot of my clients that come to me, they say, what about this AI thing? How can we use AI in our business? How can we make ourselves more efficient? How can we make the customer experience better with AI? And I'm like, you have never even done e-commerce before, right? We need to take a crawl, walk, run approach to this, right? We need to get your data in order to even begin with, right? So half your product data is on a network drive somewhere, half of it's in your sales rep's head, half of it's in a print catalog on a shelf somewhere gathering dust, half of it's coming from your suppliers and other distributors. There's no consistency to it. It's spread across spreadsheets and Google Docs and everything else. You've got exploded drawings over here, you've got images over here, you got links to videos over here. Your data is a disaster, right? And luckily, your sales reps know where to go and get and gather all that data so that they can get it into the customer's hands in a meaningful way. But that is a one-to-one communication of that information. We now need to get this into a place where it can be one-to-many, and it can be consistent, right? It could be structured, it could be organized, because at the end of the day, the best AI technology, the best personalization technology, the best demand planning technology, it's a case of garbage in, garbage out. And the reality is, until we get the data into a place where it's at least understandable, and AI can help us get it there in some respects, and we have data suppliers in the B2B world that can help us with that. We have PIM systems and syndication systems that can help us with that. We've got channel integration platforms like your platform that can help us with that. But at the end of the day, there's oftentimes some a little bit of heavy lifting that needs to be done internally first to get all that tribal knowledge that's in the business around products and around customers, and get that out of people's heads and get it into a system that then is scalable across the end-to-end customer experience. And so what I find is that usually I can put the AI discussion to bed pretty quickly by saying this: you don't need to worry about AI because all of your technology vendors are already worried about it. So they're already,
that's right.
Your ERP vendors already trying to figure out how to do better demand planning. Your search merchant personalization vendors already trying to figure out how to use AI, semantics, and large language models to make personalization better. They're already, every single technology vendor, from AI chatbots to automated interpretation and machine vision across a PDF PO that then can be converted and mapped into the order management system. Every single major vendor out there is already busting their backside to figure out how they can get AI into your technology. So you don't really need to think about that because you're just a consumer of that technology. So let's figure out, let's not even think about the tech. Let's figure out what type of customer experience you're trying to create for your customers. And then we work backwards from that. And let me and other people like me worry about the technology side. You don't need to think about that because that's not what you specialize in. You specialize in differentiating through the level of service that you provide, maybe the breadth of your catalog, maybe your pricing. There's other differentiating factors other than the tech. Because at the end of the day, all your competitors have access to all the same technology. So let's think about how you differentiate in other ways other than the tech, and then let the geeks like me worry about the technology piece.
When I look at it, I look at two components. And people always look at maybe this component more than they should, which is the tech. Hey, what can the thing do? It's like getting a car. If you've never driven a car before, what's the point? And, walk around it and kick it. I mean, it's just not a car. But if you get your data right, and data is to me, it starts with data quality, data stewardship, organization of that data based on the way it's going to be in our world, it's going to be delivered. So conceptually, what we're always thinking about is, where is this stuff going and what needs to go? Well, I need to have my product content, to your example. I need to have all my imagery in the way they want it. So it isn't just what I've got, it's what they want. And I've got to think about it from that dimension as well. And it's not trivial. That exercise we find working with our customers is eye-opening. They're like, oh, okay. Now we see what you're doing here. And usually once you've kind of gone through that, to add another destination, to add another delivery, to bring another buyer on, is pretty easy if you've come from the pain of really kind of thinking about that data. And it's kind of like your model. We don't really have a big service component to our business, but what we do is we run an audit on the data. So if you're sending something to Macy's, or you're going to send something to Amazon as an example, we look at your data from their lens saying, hey, look, you're missing 38 attributes here. You'll never get listed, or you're not optimized to that destination, and you really should think about another way to do it, or clean up your data because you're not going to sell as much as you think. And I think that concept of data and the technology, it starts with data. It always does. I think it ends with data too. Quality data, optimized data, and everything else is a conduit. And you're right. All of those systems, everything in the middle, is trying to figure out how to use AI in 20 different ways.
Nailed it. And when I go in, and one of the first questions, if I'm consulting to a seller, one of the very first questions in discovery is, because I've got a very thorough discovery process, and it's got about 150 questions, and then we have follow-up workshops, and we do a lot of things that we consider pretty special. But because I think you get better answers if you ask better questions. But one of the things that we do is we say, look, give us a sample of, say, 20 products. Give us a sample of all the attributes, all the data you have around these products, how you structure the parent-child relationships. Give us an example of both your unstructured and your structured product data, your attribute arrays. Give us all that example, and then do the exact same thing with 20 customers or 5 customers or 10 customers. Give us a sample of an export of all the data you have around your customers, whether that's out of your ERP, whether that's out of your CRM. Give us an example data set that we can see and we can actually look at alongside you. And then what we do is we do data consulting. That's one of the very, very first steps. It's, okay, is the data structure even ready for digital channels? And if it's not, because oftentimes when I'm brought in, they think they're only going to bring me in for the e-commerce piece. But because I consult across the entirety of the commerce stack, ERP, CRM, CDP, PIM systems, syndication platforms, integration technology, oftentimes we have to take 2 steps back to then even be able to start moving forward, because many times they're running legacy technology on the back end. They're running very legacy processes, and the data has been manipulated to fit those legacy systems and processes, and they just do not work in a modern digital environment. And so sometimes there's a data cleansing, data aggregation, data mapping exercise that has to take place where we're figuring out, because there you'd be surprised. I can go into a $300 million a year distribution company, and I can have the CEO, the CTO, the CIO in a discovery session, and I'll say, where does this piece of data come from? Where does this exist in the business? And they'll go, oh, we need to talk to sales rep Bill because he's the one that knows where this data is. It's wild. It's wild that these businesses, they oftentimes love going through discovery with me, even if they don't ultimately go forward with a build of some variety. They learn so much more about their business just because they have to go through the exercise of figuring out how their processes organically evolved over the last decade to land where they are today.
That can be a shocking but a very, very positive exercise if you really look at it. Data, particularly digital information, to me is an important asset of the firm. And now that you're creeping up to 30, 40, 50% of your sales being digital, not necessarily being direct, you got to take that very, very seriously, that quality and the content of that data. And for those bigger companies that are, doing this worldwide, they've got to get global consistency. There's reasons for, compliance purposes, sustainability purposes. There's a lot of data requirement. And I had a guest on last week that was very interesting, but he kept talking about that data is in a never-ending state of expansion. Whether it's regulations, tariffs, more and more information needs to be shared across the, what I'll call the delivery network than ever before. And I don't think that's going to get easier. I think it's going to get harder. But if you've got a good foundation, it should improve things dramatically. You should be able to do it faster. And if you can do it faster than your competitor, you're going to win. And I honestly believe that. I think the next 3 to 4 years, you're going to see some significant shakeouts. There's been so many companies that have been rolled up, and they have 10 different brands under a company, and they're all using different platforms and infrastructure systems. Man, you sit there and go, oh, man, that's going to be hard. How are these guys going to do that? They have to roll it out brand by brand, and they should be looking at it. I keep going back to that right to left thing. Where's it going? What are you delivering? Because that's the data you've got to put in the pot. And quite frankly, in my opinion, it does start with a data stewardship consulting exercise, and taking a step back and looking at the state of your world, because these things all change and evolve. As you said, 10 years, there's acquisitions in the middle of that. There's, I'm sure, new systems that have been dropped in over the course of that period. And all of a sudden, the data's all over the place. And you're right, in the digital space, it's got to come together, and it's got to be good. It's got to be clean, and it's going to be easy to use. And I think that, to me, is how customers are going to use data as an asset to differentiate themselves in the marketplace. And based on this conversation, Jason, I think you're kind of thinking the same way.
In the B2B world, not always, but in many, many instances, the quality of the product data is actually material to not only the buying process, but also to the usage and application of that product. And therefore, there's governance and legal issues around product data that are really mission critical in the B2B world. So if I'm in the B2C world and I get an attribute wrong around a coffee mug, say, for example, the worst that might happen is a customer may not like the color that they receive of that coffee mug and they might return it, or the dress, we don't show the right color swatch for a dress or something like that, and the customer returns it or something like that. When you're in heavy-duty industrial supplies, for example, where you're talking about a pump and how much throughput it can handle, the inlet size, the outlet size, the head it can handle, when we're talking about serious electrical components and the load-carrying capacity of those components and power boards, the kind of companies that I oftentimes work with, product data and governance and compliance are so mission critical to them that if they get one field out of order along an entire CSV of information, that can lead to very dire consequences when that product is put into use in a commercial application. And so product data in the B2B world in many instances is just, it is a non-negotiable for it to be accurate because it is so mission critical to where it's being used. If it's being used in drilling in the South Sea, for example, on an oil drilling platform, that data better be right because people's lives in many instances are going to be relying on the quality of that product data.
Yeah, very much so. Very much so. Well, Jason, I know we're running out of time here. I wanted to personally thank you. This was a great podcast. I enjoyed speaking with you very much. Learned a lot and excited. Guys, this is Chris, and this is the SYNDIC8 Series. And Jason, once again, thank you for your time. If you've enjoyed listening, follow me, Chris John, on LinkedIn. I'm regularly sharing insights and tips on digital transformation. This podcast is produced and presented by SYNDIC8. Our software products enable sales teams to sell more online faster. Please check us out at our website, SYNDIC8.io. Thank you.